welcome back to my channel, Modern Bodice. Today I'm going to be making myself a satin dress inspired by these dresses. Look how beautiful this material is. Let's get started making this dress. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than what I usually do on this channel. I'm going to be using a pattern and I'm going to alter it to make this dress because I'm just using a button down. I'm going to first go and trace my sides of the pattern onto my tracing paper, and I'm going to cut out that pattern, and then I'm going to go and cut out my fabric. I used my tracing wheel and traced my size of each piece of this pattern onto my paper. I shortened the front and back of the shirt to come to my waist instead of my hips. I traced everything in marker, added a 1/4 inch seam allowance to each piece, and cut out my pattern. To alter the front to be a crossover top, I went and I duplicated the front pattern piece. Then I went and traced these 2 lines onto that duplicate and did the cut and slash method to create my new front piece. I added seam allowance and my dart to this piece and cut it out. I went and cut all my pattern pieces from my fabric, and now I'm going to start with the collar. So because my fabric is so lightweight, I went and I added interfacing to both sides of the collar and both sides of the collar stand instead of just the under collar and the under collar stand, which is the traditional order of adding interfacing to a collar. I put the 2 collars together, right sides facing, and sewed the 2 together. Then I went and trimmed down the seam allowance in the corners and snipped into the rest of the seam allowance and turned the collar right side out and pressed it. I also pressed up the bottom edge of one of the collar stands a 1/4 inch. I sandwiched the collar between the collar stands right sides facing and sewed these together. Then I clipped into the seam allowance like so and turned everything right side out and gave it a good press, and here is my collar. Super cute. Now let's go make the top so we can attach this collar to the top portion of the dress. So here are my 2 top pieces. I'm going to sew the darts and hem this edge here with a double fold hem. Make sure that when you are cutting your fronts out, you add that hem allowance there. I sewed my folded edge in as close to the edge as possible because I was initially trying to do a very slim fold similar to a rolled hem. But ultimately I didn't like that hem in the end, and I did end up taking it out and doing it over a little bit wider. So just fold it and fold it again and sew it in place. I trimmed off the excess fabric here and then I folded it again. For the back, I went and pressed my pleats in and sandwiched the back between the 2 yokes right sides facing like so, and sew these 3 layers together. I went and pressed the yokes up and base stitched the 2 yokes together. Then I went and sewed the fronts to the back right sides facing along the shoulders. I pinned the collar stand, the side that was not previously pressed up a 1/4 inch, to the neckline of the top right sides facing. Then I sewed the collar in place. I went and did a hidden hand stitch to sew my inner collar stand in place, and this is how we're looking so far. Super cute. And now let's create the skirt. So I drafted a basic skirt pattern. The top is half my waist measurement by the length I want my skirt to be. Now I'm going to measure 6 inches down and mark half the measurement around my hips. I'm going to connect the waist point to the hip point. Then at the bottom, I'm marking half the measurement around my thighs where the skirt's hem will sit and connecting those points to the hip points. Then I curved everything out to match our body's natural curves. I cut that out and folded it in half to find the center point, and I lined up that center point on the edge of a piece of my tracing paper. I'm going to go and draw this part of the skirt here, so I trace half of my skirt onto the paper like this, and then I'm going to draw a curved line at the bottom and cut that out. And later I decided that this actually should have been taken over a little bit more than just the half length of the skirt, so I did go and adjust this piece to look more like this. And now we need the other front part of the skirt with the pleats. So I made a duplicate of the main skirt pattern. Then I'm going to go and draw in the bottom curve on that duplicate. And then we're going to go and do the cut and slash method again to create the pleats for this pattern piece. Then I went and marked marks 2 inches apart on the short side, and I traced lines all the way across my skirt pattern like this. I cut across those lines, making sure not to completely cut through the other side so that everything stayed attached. And then I began the spread, adding 3 inches in between each gap like so, and taping it in place. I added a triangle to the gap areas to use as a guide when sewing in my pleats later, and I cut this new shape out. Once that was cut out, I went and cut all 3 pieces from my fabric. I'm going to start by adding the pleats to the front skirt, folding the triangle in half like this to form each pleat, and pressing and pinning the pleats in place. Then I went and sewed all my pleats in place and cut off the excess fabric from those triangles. I went and serged the opposite side of the pleated side and went and serged the coordinating side of the back skirt as well. I'm going to sew these two together right sides facing, but I'm going to sew a basting stitch down to the pins and a normal stitch from the pins down to the bottom edge of the skirt, as this will need to be seam ripped later to add the zipper. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to hem this entire piece. I'm going to do the rolled hem, so I'm going to press the entire edge up. I'm going to sew that in place as close to the edge as possible, and then I'm going to trim off the excess fabric, and then I'm going to fold it again, a little roll though this time, and I'm going to sew that in place, and I'm also going to do that with the third part of the skirt that was not attached yet. Once both are hemmed, I'm going to sew this side of the skirt together, and then I'm going to seam rip open the basting stitch on the opposite side and add some darts to my skirt. And this is what I'm working with now. Now to attach the skirt to the top portion of this dress, I'm going to sew these two sides together, but for this side I'm just going to serge each edge individually, as this is where the zipper will go, just like for the skirt. Once that's sewn together, I'm going to gather the bottom edge of the top, and then I'm going to pin it to the skirt right side spacing. The other half of the front overlaps like this, and then all of this gets sewn together. Now I need to add the zipper, so I'm going to sew this side closed with a basting stitch and then press the seam open like so. Then I'm going to pin my invisible zipper to the seam and using my zipper foot, sew my zipper in place from the top of the fabric. This brownish zipper was the closest I could find that matched this color fabric, and sometimes it peeks through and I'm not really a fan of that, so I'm going to go and press along each side of the zipper just to flatten things out a bit more, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to paint the zipper with acrylic paint to make it match my dress. And now it's time to add the sleeves, and I decided that I was going to do a long cuff with the two loops that are going to attach to buttons that I'm going to put there. And then I'm just going to go and add some type of closure here because this falls apart. So let's go and add our sleeve. So for that little sleeve keyhole, I went and sewed some bias tape I made with the fabric and sewed it to each side of the sleeve like this. I folded the sleeve in half and sewed down the sleeve and across the top edge of the bias tape. I went and cut my sleeve cuff to be 4 inches longer than the original sleeve cuff that came with the pattern. I made a long loop for the buttons I'm going to put on the cuffs and cut them to the proper size and sew them onto my cuff. I then followed the sewing pattern's instructions to finish adding my cuffs and sleeves to my dress. I did things a tiny bit different from the pattern's directions, but I think you'll get a better result with your sleeves and cuffs if you follow the directions. And sorry for the lack of details here. I cannot find some of the video clips showing exactly how these steps were done. But if you follow the directions on your pattern, with the exception of just adding length to your cuff, you should be good to go. And that completes this sewing project. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and just let me know what you want to see me make. Bye!